So let's welcome Dr. Wulamu.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor to introduce our research, share our research with public. And again, my topic today is unmanned aerial systems, using that for food and water security in a changing climate. So I'm going to talk about several aspects related to this talk. One is remote sensing. What's a remote sensing, right? And then and current advances in remote sensing, unmanned aerial systems, and its applications, number of areas I'm going to talk about. So what's a remote sensing? And every day, like you open your eyes, you use remote sensing to see things from a distance, right? Without touching it, without being in a distance. So in a distance, you can see things, you can and make estimate of things. That's a remote sensing you use everyday life. But the remote sensing we use here is, I'm talking about is, we have systems and sensors deployed on satellites, unmanned aerial systems, aircrafts, and that's used to look at a whole bunch of issues from water to food, environment, and what's going on, and human geography and issues like that. So that's what a definitions of remote sensing in a simple term. So I'm going to show you several photos here. This is at St. Louis University campus, a concrete paveway, right? And we every day we see around. And then this is a stressed short fescue grass, and you see it's a little bit brightish or something. And then down here is really healthy fescue grass. And then two box trees. One is a little bit stressed, and then the other one is dark green. And one of my PhD students is holding a remote sensing instrument on this backpack, and then scanning that two box trees and collecting remote sensing data sets. Both of those are water, and basically under the bottom of this pond here is kind of yellowish rock under there, right? And here it's a paint. Under the bottom of the pond is painted blue. So let's look at the spectra of those things. And I'm not going to talk about all this explaining those, but in simple, all of those things look different when we look at and using remote sensing images. And then there's and every day, like when you look at a white shirt, it looks white. Why it looks white? Trees look green. Why does it look green?
It reflects the green light.
Excellent. So a tree absorbs red light, right? Converts that to a chemical energy or biomass or things like that, and then it reflects green light, and that's why it looks green. A white shirt, it reflects all colors in visible range. That's why it looks white. A blue jacket, it reflects blue light. That's why we see it's blue, right? And then, so what we are seeing is a reflected light. Your eyes want a perfect example of a remote sensor. You can see things from distance. And what you are looking at, what you are seeing is actually reflected light. And what I'm showing here is exactly the reflected light. And then the higher this reflectance is basically, and here up to 0 to 80%, right? And then here's the spectra. For the blue light, you see a strong blue light reflectance somewhere around here. And then the other water, underneath you see a different other water features is actually not showing blue and something like that. But the bottom line is what we see everyday life is a reflected light in blue, green, red. But unfortunately, our eyes cannot see anything reflected beyond visible, or near infrared, and those colors we can see. But things like vegetation, plants, reflect significantly, like huge, and look at those spectral areas where like near infrared and then heat reflectance and things like that. It's actually a lot of things we can't see. So what does remote sensing do is we design sensors to measure exactly how much light is being reflected in red, blue, green, near infrared, and all of the spectrum from 500 nanometer here to 2500 nanometer reflected light, right? And then correlate that what's happening in the environment, what's happening in a plant. Just like when you go to to see a doctor, they measure your heartbeat and your breath and the number of blood pressure, things like that. We have instruments to measure blood pressure and photosynthesis and things like that for plants. And then those are actually relate to so-called reflected light. And now in the fall and especially this time, what you see is like trees and turn it to red or yellow or something like that. And that time basically chlorophyll concentration, and someone mentioned chlorophyll, that's a great point, that in leaves that died out. So the chlorophyll actually absorbs red light and reflects green. Now it died, so it does not reflect green light, but reflects reddish and things like that, right? So those are what we use remote sensing to detect and quantify and correlate that to yield, plant health, photosynthesis, and things like that. Okay. So why do we care? Well, what's happening? And challenges in agriculture, and especially for Midwestern regions, it's big, and this is an agricultural region, right? So worldwide, and here's the increase for food production by 2050. We need to have about 63% more food in the future, in next several decades, to feed the population in the world, right? And then, on the other hand, agriculture irrigation systems are less efficient or could be more efficient, and there is a demand for improvement in technology. Then and then we talk about climate change, we talk about CO2 or methane and number of gas emissions, and how the emissions is polluting the environment. So agriculture is responsible for about 50% of gas emissions, and this is a big thing, right? And we need more food, but how we can produce more food without causing more damage to the air we breathe, or for our environment or water systems. And this is an average age of farmers today in the US. And then you can imagine another decade or two, this will be about 70 years old, right? And then I bet, don't know, maybe there's young teenagers I see a lot, and kids, and how many of them would be interested in farming? Anyone interested in farming? Oh, okay, that's good. That's encouraging. Okay, so those issues. So how do we address those issues, right? And then and one thing we have been doing. I mean, this is also a lot going on recently. Like in St. Louis Science Center, we established a agriculture exhibit, and you may have visited that. And so basically, there's we grow crops, soybean, corn, a number of things like that. And then this is a small but very smart robot, and it can measure air temperature at different levels. It can measure soil temperature, soil moisture, pH value. What we do is we can program it to walk around the field, collect soil moisture, and then report that back to a system there or on your tablet, right? So you can see what's going on and what plots are actually need this irrigation and what's happening with the soil, etc. Right? And then fun thing is, it turns out this is the one most attractive thing at Science Center for Kids at this age. Okay, so that's a good way to encourage and kind of educate our children about agriculture, how important it is, and also and we fly drones. We have been demonstrating drones in the science center, just to give up a notion to public that it's not a bad thing. And we know, we have heard drones, targeting bad people, and we know that. But there's many good things with drones you can use for research. You can do many things more efficiently. Imagine you are a farmer. You have hundreds of acres of field to farm, right? It's very difficult to go every day. You run across the field and see what's going on. Imagine you have a cage, just like a chicken cage, and where you have 10 small drones, and then you press a button, door opens, drones fly, and then talk to each other. Hey, I covered this field, you covered that field, and then 5 minutes, and collects imagery or hundreds of acres of fields, and on your tablet, on your phone, on your hand, right? You can see, hey, what's going on? Red color there, what's going on? Maybe it needs water, or a storm damaged it yesterday, and things like that, right? So that's what we are envisioning for the future, and technology is there. I mean, drone unmanned aerial systems, I mean, in Europe, decades ago, and this has started, and there's less regulations, or I don't know, but basically there was and our market, our regulations here has not been opened up for civil research or use for drones until very recently, right? But this technology has been developed in Europe, Japan, and many other countries decades ago. But it's really a new era or new technology, and with tremendous opportunity today. So why we should worry about, and this is a global map of water stress and projected water stress under future climate. 2012, we had a major drought in Midwest. And I think, I forgot the exact number, but it's about 14 billion or some loss due to that drought in agriculture. And now this is what future scenario look like under future climate. And what our red areas here is as areas will be in significant water stress or less water. And look at Missouri and Midwest, somewhere around here. And that's where areas, I mean, will be in a water stress in 2025 or 2030 in future climate. And then also, and most of those areas, India, East China, just like US Great Plains, Midwest and East China, this part is area for huge agricultural production. So all of those areas will be under water stress and affecting agriculture and food production. And also how will that affect crop yields? With our red colors here, what I'm showing, and areas where the project crop yield, like up to minus 50%, up to 50% less crop yield we expect by 2050. So what we are talking about is most of those areas in red color areas, and there will be a significant reduction in crop yields due to climate change, due to changes in rainfall and precipitation. So what we are looking at is, and on one hand, we have to produce more food to feed like 63 or 70% more food than today to feed the growing population by 2050. On the other hand, what will be looking at is drought stress globally that would cause up to 50% reduction in crop yields than today, right? So those are problems. And then what about in Midwest? This is a temperature change from 1900 to 2000 and even 2010. And reduction crop yield, soybean, corn in Midwest. And you see there's a linear trend. And also, and future climate like 2041 to 2070, you see the number of dry days and difference than today. So there are more days we'll be in stress and drought, water stress, and due to high temperature and then and less soil moisture. And whatever you see Missouri, and this it will be in the really high stress and high temperature by 2050. So it will have significant effects on Missouri agriculture and also Midwest. So that's about water, right? And also there's another term, ozone. And ozone in higher atmosphere is good. It blocks ultraviolet radiation, but the ozone on the ground and near surface, it's bad. It causes a number of other issues. I mean, when it was, and most significantly, most important, it will affect, again, crop yield. It's a gas, yes, but it damages young leaves and then during its growth stage and causes a declines in crop yield. This is a figure I've borrowed from one of my colleagues who actually worked for NASA for 32 years and then joined to St. Louis University. So this is his work, okay? And then this tri-state area in Missouri, Illinois, and those areas. So this is a soybean yield, and what you see is red areas are actually high yield areas, right? And this is actually surface ozone. And then you see wherever there's high concentration of ozone, the red means higher concentration. And you see a lower crop yield or soybean yield. And of course, there's a series of studies, statistical analysis been done to justify this, but this is a visual and effect you see and how it spatially correlates. So more increase in ozone means we'll have less yield and in the future. And then USDA scientists recently found ozone also affects corn and has a number of other types of crops as well. Okay, so how do we do this? And then the way we do this is and more invest on technology developments and either technology that monitor agriculture and or improve efficiency of irrigation systems in agriculture and number of things. And remote sensing is not something new. I mean, 1980s. This is 1862, and we were curious about to see Earth's ground from sky, and we used balloons to do that, and later on, actually, I'm going to pass this slide. But pigeons were used to remotely sense in cities and urban areas. And actually those pigeons were equipped with cameras here, okay? This is an imagery of a European castle obtained from a camera mounted on a pigeon in Germany. So this is in 1900, right? And then now, and in 1957 and sometime, and Russia launched a first civilian use, first actually largest environmental satellite called Sputnik in 1957. In 1960s and especially 72, and NASA launched a series of satellites, have been providing data since then. And as soon as it's in the orbit, it has been like circulating the Earth, providing data, right? And European Space Agency in 2002 launched a very large satellites. It's huge, right? And then now we have hundreds of satellites. Those are, we know it's for civilian use, but there are many, and we don't know. And like for national security or a number of things, like imagine every week there is a satellite launch to the sky and think about how many satellites we may have, right? It's even become a concern or problem for, and become a trash in the upper space. So we are at that level, and hundreds of satellites have been providing data for us, and day and night, and we are utilizing. And the recent trend in remote sensing has become to develop more small, cheaper satellites. Like this is a shoebox satellite. You can launch hundreds of them from International Space Station, and you can see you can still see a shoes on the ground from International Space Station, right? That level of satellites here. There's a TED talk about microsatellites. And then more excitingly recently, like unmanned aerial systems and drones, so-called, and become very much fun and creating multi-billion industrial opportunity for many areas. So what we do is then, and we use remote sensing sensors, okay, and our eyes cannot see beyond visible, but sensors can see beyond visible and what's in there. So we develop sensors and use like sensors on the ground. This is an unmanned aerial system, manned aircrafts, and and then satellites, right? And then we look at things from local scale to all the way up to regional and global scale to address food security. And we set up experiments in small scale, but those experiments are meant to build models, develop algorithms, and then scale up that to entire country or globe using satellites, orbiting satellites. So the focus of today is more on my talk focused on unmanned aerial systems and how it can be very useful for research. And unmanned aerial systems, that's an FAA, Federal Aviation Administration definition. And there's also another term called unmanned aerial vehicle, same thing. Remotely piloted aircraft system, same thing, and mostly term from Air Force. And drones, drones, it's more, and in the past used to target bad people, right? But what we call is UAS, unmanned aerial system. And basically systems like that, that provides us data for a variety of research and other applications. And by the way, this is a test site we set up in Columbia, Missouri, in a cornfield, and where we are studying how corn and maize and sorghum, how much water they use, what's a sustainable way to grow, to get the same amount of food or biomass or energy, while and using less water and things like that. We have been studying that topic. So those are my lab, and where students enjoy making, creating new toys and instruments, and feeling like they are changing the world with those technology. And these are 3D designed parts, and those drones are actually built in my lab, and variety of sensors are mount those, and those are field side, and those sensors are actually expensive, and like 5 or 10 years ago we couldn't get those sensors. That's NASA or European Space Agency, that's toys for like big country federal agencies. But today this is a $70,000 instrument, and a researcher with funding, I can buy it, I can get it. So this is a hyperspectral cameras, and then and deployed on different systems. And hyperspectral imaging is another area really become very popular today. And if you watched Big Hero 6 movie, right? There is an episode there, some you have allergy to peanuts or this, that, you are not happy today. Do you remember that that part? So basically it's a hyperspectral camera, if you saw that, if you recall that, and scanning your body and telling you what's your feeling and what's the problem in your health and things like that. But of course that's a movie, right? Mm-hmm. But the technology is, it's not there yet, but and making some good progress in hyperspectral imaging and this, that. And there are robots actually in the field. They can pick what avocado is ready to harvest, or what tomato is ready to harvest, things like that. And machines are working to do that, and using those sensors, it's become more affordable and developing. So this is another field we set up where we have been studying soybean and different varieties of soybean and how which genotypes or which species can live in harsh environment and things like that. And where we built models and to monitor food security. So what I'm going to show is first a case study and using drones to study food security. And again, we wanted to know, this is a very large project funded by National Science Foundation, about 20 million grant to Missouri to study agriculture. And many organizations in Missouri are part of that research, and we have one portion, but mostly working on remote sensing aspects of that. The overall idea is how we want to understand how climate-related water stress affect Midwest agriculture. Can we detect yield loss or potential issues for crops, like early as possible? And then, so if we know like weeks early something's happening, we can prevent that actually become an issue or reduce crop yield, right? That's the goal. And then how we can apply this to an entire nation or globe and address the issue related to food security. We did experiments. This is an area actually in St. Louis area, and a NASA aircraft flew over and collecting data. We were on the field collecting data. So that's one way we scale up our results from ground to aircraft. This is actually, the NASA aircraft flew at about 20,000 feet. And then other test sites. And again, on this map, whatever these red areas are test sites where we have been experimenting the effect of ozone on crops. And you may notice so-called ozone gardens, and run by one of my colleagues, Professor Jack Fishman. You may notice that in science centers, there's one in Grants Farm, a number of areas. Those are areas we experiment the effects of ozone on crop yield. And in those green dots are areas where we set up experiments to see how climate-related stress or that affect crop yield. And this is one view of an experimental field, and this is another site we have been looking at. And again, a number of systems and built in our laboratory. Students were trained and to FAA standards and certificate to fly, right? And we collect data. And this is one of this soybean field. What I'm showing here is this is an just visible image of the field. And then I'm measuring chlorophyll content from that drone. And it's giving me like whatever red areas where there is like chlorophyll is almost dead, like and plants are doing really bad. And then those green areas are where actually plants are doing really good, healthy. And you may notice in the borderline here, that's actually commercially grown soybeans. Those are other two different gene species. We want to know which ones really grow well. And then this is nitrogen concentration, and when you have more rain and that nitrogen deficiency become an issue. When you over fertilize your field, that nitrogen are less used and end up in the water we drink, right, and causing issues in water quality. So what I'm showing here is the concentration of nitrogen in plants, and whatever red area means less nitrogen absorption and bad growth, etc. So this is just one example of how we can use the technology to look at crop growth, nitrogen concentration, and also we can estimate biomass of plants. And then this is another cool experiment. This is actually a 100-year more older field was set up, and we set up root growth barriers, like plastic barriers, to restrict or drain water out, and that plastic barrier is placed at about 0.3 meter or 30 centimeter depths, then 45 centimeter depths, and all the way. So basically, the shallower the root depths, the less water that plant gets, right? This is a natural environment. We simulate stress and water stress. And then one of our experiment, actually this year, and we have been monitoring, of course, all the time, but we had one dry week. It started at July 15, ended at July 22. There was no rain, and perfect window for us to see the effect of stress on soybean crops. So this is July 16, and you don't see any stress. And then July 20, this is the panel where the drought is more strongest, and you see, and visually you can see the effect. And then July 22, and then stress developed to other panels. And this is just visible images, what we can see, but the remote sensing can tell us what we can't see. And this is again the same day. This is from a unmanned aerial system, and very clear, even the same panel, the water stress gradient is different. Some areas are really exposed to significant stress, and we also see stress on those panels from sensors. This is actually from a satellite flying over 900 kilometers above, right? Above from the surface. And we can see the stress development on all of those panels. So it's a nice example of how, like in a satellite, unmanned aerial system, and we are able to detect same stress effects on crops, and that has significant implications to scale up our results from field to regional or global scale. And then again, another same data set, but showing different methods, showing highlighting the stress. And in the middle, actually, it's a canopy temperature from unmanned aerial systems. And those this too is satellite imagery, same field. And then we also did a diurnal experiment, like from morning to afternoon, how crops respond to stress. Can they recover or not? And what's the tipping point that crop cannot recover anymore and exposed to significant stress, and addressing things like that. And basically this is in visual imagery, what you can see. You don't see visually on that day, we couldn't see any stress. But from sensors, you see all these dots and all of these areas that are actually plants are suffering. And so even within a day, right? And those are actually photos taken, and this is one of our fields, this is another field, and this field. One of our unmanned aerial system is flying, collecting data sets. And then so what I'm going to do is that I can detect stress. So, and most important part of this research is being able to tell crop yield months ahead. And this is one of our results, and is where we use those images, early season data, to predict terminal yield and months, 3 months before. So that's what I'm showing on this figure, really nice prediction. And the implication is that it's June, and assuming soybean, right? It's June, it's still, soybeans are growing, and I am predicting your yield, like, which is going to be harvested in October, like 3-4 months before. So basically, and the idea is, and we use machine learning technologies, drones, to predict your yield and find out and how you can improve that yield, or what's missing, nitrogen, fertilizer, or water, or what you have, what you can do to prevent yield loss or improve your yield. And our technology can tell you, we can tell you what's possible. So that's an exciting part of our work as well. And also we do a lot of outreach, and again in Science Center, flying drones here. This is a drone is flying, and this is our experiments. And if you go there, you see our logo as well, St. Louis University National Science Foundation, and that's us working with Science Center and working on outreach and education issues. And you see on this field, and those cornfields are actually different varieties. One plot is really sensitive to water stress, one plot is tolerant, and we showcase how crops responding to stress. And so yeah, and this is a cool 3D view actually generated by a drone of the Science Center Egg Exhibit. And then another interesting part is this is an infrared temperature map of Science Center, and this is an visual imagery. And what's interesting with this is collected by a drone, is that there's two types of roof, all white, looks same material, right? But if you look at temperature map of these two types of roof, one looks really cold, the other one is really warm. So the implication says the type of roof material you use for your house or any construction, that has also significant implications for our climate, environment, and things like that. On one roof, it all looks same material. It's all, but what you see is one is really absorbing a lot of heat, right? One is actually reflecting all heat away. What's the result is less heat is stuck on the surface. That's actually good. It reflects out, right? But and on this one, it does not. So those are actually reflecting more. Those actually absorbing that heat and keeping for itself, and then you have to spend more on cooling as well, a number of things. And again, another view of the same field, Science Center and crop field is here. Yeah, this is a good results as well. So basically, those two soybean field, one is irrigated, this is rain-fed. Those 4 plots, 2 different corn varieties. This 2 is irrigated, this 2 is rain-fed. And you see there, I mean, from those images, we can see very clearly those rain-fed ones, tolerant ones are really growing well. And then the other one is like simulating future climate, water stress, not doing well, etc. So those different colors and the colors like reddish color means more healthy plant growth, and then whatever yellowish or other colors means plants are not doing well. Our team and actually collaborators from Washington University, Danforth Plant Science Center, those PhD students in my lab, and also other collaborators from Harstow State University. So on this parts of the research, so impact, and what we think is like have positive impact on Missouri agriculture. And in 2006, Missouri agriculture generated about 33 billion revenue, right? 99.3% of Missouri income or revenue. And also it employs about 378,000 more jobs in 2006. So that's a big for us, for the state. So agriculture is big sector. And also and many other outreach and activities. That's the impact of this research. Next, this is another research actually funded by Department of Energy Advanced Technology Program. And what it is, and again, in setup experiments in Kansas, this is in Maricopa. So there's about 500 different genotypes of energy sorghum. So what we are doing is just like you let players play and you pick the best soccer player to compete on nationals, we are selecting a best sorghum genotypes to produce future energy. Okay, so in a sustainable energy. So to do this, and this box, and this is actually a $2-3 million instrument, in this box we have all types of sensors and collecting data day and night, right? And then we have drones and satellites, again doing the similar experiment and identifying which one of those sorghum plots or genotypes are really doing well in drought conditions or this, that. So that could be used to generate future energy. Okay, this is another research we have been collaborating with Danforth Plant Science Center, and then 10 more organizations from East Coast to West Coast, from South to North. And so those are on water quality research and on food security. Now on water quality, and this is another issue. I mean, we drink water, the drinking water comes from streams, right? So, and agriculture and water, they are related. It's not, we can't look at them as a separate systems, because one example I just briefly mentioned, it was nitrogen, and you fertilize, depending on your crop growth and time and rainfall precipitation, that fertilizer ends up in the streams, and then and we may end up drinking that water. Like algae blooms is a big issue, and sometimes it's toxin, right? And this is you may heard the Lake Erie in Toledo, Ohio in August 2014. This was actually made in New York Times. That was a big algae outbreak. People were told, don't drink water from your tap, right? And then this is a satellite view of algae bloom and developments in Gulf of Mexico. Basically all fertilizers, agriculture we do in Midwest and in Mississippi basins, and all goes into Mississippi River and killing fish and other species in Gulf of Mexico. And that's another and big thing we worry about, right? So when we study water quality, we look at number of things like suspended sediments, like when you see suspended sediments, it's like dirt in the water, right? And then other things, and it's hard to see, like nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, and also cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. That's and some species of cyanobacteria is toxic, and that's an issue for our health too. Now, the way, and most of the time, the monitoring water quality is done manually by boats, and this is a USGS facility that's set up in the streams collecting data sets, right? And this is expensive, maintaining it and going to the field, and one day you can, if you can cover like 10 points, measure, right? And think about Mississippi River, think about streams, Mark Twain Lake, Carlisle Lake, all streams. It's very difficult to do manually. So our mission, our goal is to develop remote sensing techniques, again, drones and sensors, to do this in somewhat automated way, so we can save cost and be more effective. And most importantly, and the goal is to predict what's going to happen in water quality or algae blooms. So, and what I'm showing here is those are stations, locations of and U.S. Geological Survey stations or stations managed by other organizations where water quality is being monitored. But many other areas, look at those streams, there's no, and this is a huge area too, there's no monitoring sites. So that's what we are doing, using and remote sensing to do that. What I'm going to show today is a brief study we have done and Lake Decatur, Carlisle Lake, and then all of those monitoring sites we went out, grabbed sample water, fly drones, collect data, and then and to see if we can monitor water quality using sensors and drones. And our field work, and again we have handheld instruments like those, and we went with boats, and those streamers, we grab sample water quality, fly drones with sensors, and then this is me actually scanning that water, my students. So and the idea is build equation like, and y equals to ax plus b type of equation. The x is remote sensing imagery, y is your water quality, right? So ideally we collect an imagery from a drone or from a satellite, and then be able to tell what's your water quality in your streams. So that's the type of research we have been working on. And then those again in a merrimack stream, a drone we are flying in that area. So and this is more challenging but exciting research, still under development. And again, remote sensing has been long used in monitoring algae blooms, and again those are examples and actually showing and issues in algae issues that's causing fish kills and as a number of other things. And then oops, it happened. Almost there. Yeah. Again, this is satellite images collected on July 28, 2015 over Lake Erie and then Lake St. Clair. And whatever those colors you see, the green, that's algae bloom. So those satellite data are free as long as you are able to play with satellite imagery, free. You can see your streamers, you can see your and water quality and things like that. And we have been funded by many organizations, including, of course, St. Louis University and NASA, National Science Foundation, and Electric Power Research Institute, RPE, that's DOE, U.S. Geological Survey. And the most fun part of my talk today are several videos I'm going to show. Now, let's see. This is so this drone is collecting data, and then this is following him. So see if it's doing good job or not. And let me see here. This is one of the field I showed. It's in Columbia, Missouri. There's a hyperspectral imaging sensor on here, collecting data all around. And another video here. Yeah, this is a close-up view of that same field. Let me see what else I have. Yeah, crop scouting. So, well, with that, I'm ready to take any questions if you have.
Is there any commercialization of agricultural imaging?
Yeah, absolutely. We are working on a number of technology and patent applications right now, but it's a big business now. Like in California, many areas, it's already at industrial scale. Like you make an agreement, a farmer makes an agreement with a company, they come every week, fly, collect data, and tell you what's going on. Yeah, it's a big business right now. Okay.
You didn't mention livestock at all. Did you use it to scan any livestock? Or have you used it to scan any livestock?
No. Actually, that's a very good question. And one of my students from St. Louis Zoo, actually, he wants to use hyperspectral imaging to study animal happiness and scan them and see if they are happy or, or what's their feeling and things like that. Very interesting question. But like an industrial scale, like in food production, hyperspectral imaging is often used in, like, say, you have a lot of apple, packing a lot of apple, right? Which apple is good, bad, and it's scanned, and then on the other hand, the machinist will pick the bad ones out. Yes? Yeah. Question, young man?
Oh, sorry. You mentioned early on that the average age of a farmer is 58 years old. Yeah. Does that count for employees of like larger commercialized farming industries, or is that just local farmers?
Yeah, everything counting an average. Yeah. I don't know if we can go website here.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
You want me to type it in?
Yeah, I just remote sensing lab. .org. Yeah, if you go to media, please. So this is our lab website. You can see all types of research. I'll go down a little bit, please. It's going. Oh yeah, yeah. So more. You can learn a lot what type of research we have been doing, and cool kids in our lab doing research. So those, if you are in high school, you want to go to join the Cool Kids Club, you're welcome. And send me emails and things like that. Question?
How large were those drones?
Oh, it can be as small as very tiny to, I mean, all sizes, like
The last ones.
it's maybe this size,
Yeah.
like in one direction like this.
Yeah.
We don't live in metric world, but it came with like in meter, like the one leg, the length is 1 meter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's large. Like this is large ones, but we have very small ones as well. Yeah.
How does your research compare to like what Climate Corporation's doing with their field view and?
Very interesting question. Yeah, I want to know more what they are doing, but I know they are doing a lot of crop agriculture and things like that. But I don't know what exactly they are working on.
How closely do you work with the seed developers? Because a lot of companies are developing drought-resistant seed and
Yes.
disease-resistant seeds, etc.
Yeah.
So what is the linkage between the work that you do versus the work data versus complementing the work they do? How much interplay is there between the organizations?
Yeah, yeah, great question. St. Louis, I feel like it's a world plant and research center, like Danforth Plant Science Center. If you have visited, like there are scientists who works on plant genomics, gene editing, things like that. And actually, we work with them, and there are and also USDA scientists, right? And for sorghum, for example, like 500 different types of hybrid species, and is actually developed in the labs and then planted in the field, and then we have been testing with them. My lab, we don't have a direct collaboration with seed developing companies right now, but we have good collaboration with researchers like in Danforth Plant Science Center or Mizzou Biology Department, who actually works on this type of research. James?
Do you know if are there any, I guess, industrial applications versus agricultural and water? Like our company does a lot of industrial work, and I thought, are there applications we could use drones for either surveying or just, I guess, company, maybe the efficiency of insulation on the roofs, for example, like we saw photographs. Any applications that we can think of or use for that?
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, in real estate companies are using drones for one, and when for marketing and one obvious applications, right? And then two, yeah, and thermal imaging and your roof insulations. That's actually the best way to check out. It doesn't cost too much. I mean, the smaller like drones, commercial ones, you can buy for $1,500 and do all the fun you want to do. I mean, today is like from inspecting power lines, right, bridges, and those are just a few examples of applications in industry, but there are many.
Have you been able to harness weather yet, or is that something that
harness weather for
and
energy?
Bring it to where it's needed and take it away where it's not?
Yeah.
Is that on the horizon?
I don't know that. Yeah, I'm a remote sensing scientist, so yeah, that's not my field. Can't comment.
Were you aware of, is there any like tension, is there publicly available imaging data and maybe private commercial, is there a tension between that? And I can see that this imaging data could be used in futures markets, people trying to make money off of buying and selling futures or whatever. They would like to have this data.
They complement each other, right? There are different levels of data sets, right? Many of them are free, but there are very high resolutions. The images from space station, you can see a shoe on the street, right? That level of images. There are some becoming freely available, but mostly that's still commercial. You have to buy, right? And then on the other hand, there are NASA images collected by NASA satellites. Most of them are free, but it's for agriculture, environment, and that. So it has a different use. But there are businesses using freely available data, but it's not just providing that data as it is, because as it is, it's without training. It's very difficult to interpret, right? they take those freely available data and turn that into a product. And for example, like, yeah, your crop is doing well here, you need fertilizer there. That information can be generated from freely available data, but proprietary patent software or applications. So, and yeah.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.